good to be here. It's good to be able to tell my story. We're in a new place right now, and so it's good to review it again. It was in 1984 when we lived in Winnipeg. We were an average, normal family, a couple, and we had 3 adorable children. It was Friday, November 30th, when our lives changed. Our daughter, Candace, 13 years old, disappeared on her way home from school. We were frantic. Through the media, we begged the city of Winnipeg to come and help us find her, and they responded beautifully. They plastered the city with posters, "Have you seen Candace?" At the time, 6.5 weeks later, her body was found in a shack not that far from our place. Her hands and her feet had been tied, and she had died of exposure. It was a horrible moment for us. There was no real evidence, no suspect. It just appeared as if a complete stranger had taken her to the shack, tied her, and then abandoned her in the cold winter to die of hypothermia. On the day that her body was found, a man appeared at our door and introduced himself as a parent of a murdered child. And he says, "I've come to tell you what to expect." We invited him to the kitchen table, and where we were debriefing over a warm cherry pie, and there, for 2 hours in vivid detail, he told us the exact account of the murder of his daughter. Then he said, it's robbed us of everything. It's robbed us of our health, our relationships, my ability to concentrate, my ability to work, and even the memory of my daughter. Cliff and I were terrified. We recognized in him something that I recognized and learned about, and it was called what we called the victim-offender trauma bond, a bond in which the victim and the offender are engaged in a battle of justice, often to the bitter end, even to death. This is a slide of my husband sculpted to represent that kind of bond, the tying of the hands, the tying that didn't happen only with Candace, but that happened in our lives too at that moment. Just before all of this had happened, though, I had read a book by Viktor Frankl called Man's Search for Meaning. And in this book, I learned that we do have we might not have a choice over the events of our lives, but we do have a choice over how we're going to deal with them in our attitudes, our purposes, and our values. And we decided we were going to do something about it. Without even knowing what it meant, we chose the word forgiveness as an alternative route. We wanted to disengage from the futile battle before it even began. Inadvertently, this decision came out at the very, very first press conference, and it was splashed all over the newspapers. And so we had to live with it for the next 27 years. Choosing forgiveness right from the beginning was really important, because it's not as if we did it all the time, but it sort of kept us to the purpose of what was going on around us. But you know what? It didn't spare us from the reality of it. It didn't spare us from the pain of it. This slide is another one of my husband's art, a weary warrior with his sword. Shortly after, a friend came to visit. I made a pot of tea, and she was a woman of integrity, and demanded integrity of everyone around her. And she just said, "I sense no vengeance in you, but what would it really take for there to be justice? Would it be execution?" I had never allowed myself that question, but I wanted to go there for her, and I just said, no, it wouldn't be enough. The murderer would be dying for something he did. Candace was innocent. There's no equity in that. I was shocked at my answer, and I wanted to go to that place. And I said 10 child murderers would have to die. And in my mind's eye, I saw 10 men, 10 hooded figures against a brick wall, and an executioner, and still wasn't enough. And I said, and I would have to pull the trigger. And I took that gun and I put it in my fingers, and I pulled that trigger 10 times, and it was delicious. I was so surprised at that wonderful feeling of doing justice in my own hands. So much for my Mennonite peace-loving identity. But I did gain a whole new understanding of what my issues were. I understood the depth of my pain and the depth of my rage, but also how mysterious the issues were. So I knew forgiveness was important, but I knew it was just about letting go. But before I let go, I would have to know what I was letting go of. So I decided to explore all the issues. I went to crime victims right across the country in my talking and in my speaking, and I went into Stony Mountain and talked to lifers. I went everywhere asking, what is it about murder that can destroy us? And I could feel that negative feeling already coming on me. Now, I identified 15 elements, and I'm going to go through them very, very quickly. I don't want you to remember them. I just want to give you a feeling of the issues that are involved and what I had to let go of. I had to let go of my need to find a happy ending to my story. I had to let go of my fear and realize that safety for now was forever an illusion. I had to let go of my grief and learn to laugh again. I had 2 other children who needed me to concentrate on life, not death. I had to let go of my ego. Now, this one was hard. And my need to defend myself, even when there were unwarranted suspicions swirling around our family. I had to let go of my narrow faith and expand it to fit what I was experiencing. I had to let go of the old me and make peace with my new identity, that of a parent of a murdered child. I had to let go of my expectations that life is fair and somehow I would be compensated or things would return to the way they were. I had to let go of my guilt. Whew, that was tough. I had to let go of my need to learn, to know, and live in a mystery. I had to let go of my rage. I had to let go of my obsession with the offender and wanting him to take accountability and responsibility for what he had done. I had to let go of my need for perfect justice. There's a criminal justice system, but it's not perfect. I had to let go of my dream of closure and live in the process and live in the now. I had to let go of my hope of peace and reconciliation. I had to let go of my right to feel sorry for myself. That's a lot of letting go. And I began to realize that letting go is wonderful, but it isn't sustainable because you're letting go of everything, and it starts to create a kind of emotional vacuum. So I decided that we needed to do love, to realize that we needed to fill ourselves with a positive emotion. And Candace herself was my inspiration. She loved people. Her theme song was "Friends Are Friends Forever." And in the slide, you can see her love of horses. She was just a delightful child. Love is the most powerful force on this planet Earth. There is no way I can even begin to start to unpack it for you today. There are tons of books out there that you can read on it. There is a relational, unconditional love that exudes generosity, compassion, and understanding, a love that holds to the common good, for the offender, for the victim, for the families of the victim, all. A love that encompasses all of us. It is a love that values absolutely everyone and believes we are all, in the end, final and equal before our Creator. You know, I thought we had done it. We were celebrating at my son's, he's my youngest son's wedding, and my other daughter had been married, and it was just kind of a wedding of celebration, and it was 22 years after Candace had disappeared, and I thought, we've done it. We're all together. We are still in love. We can still celebrate. And oh, we did it so intensely. It was just like a huge milestone. We had forgiven. A year later, the police came to us and said they'd cracked the case. They now knew who had done it. Mark Edward Grant was charged with the murder of our daughter 22 years after the fact. The more I learned about him, the more repulsed I was. Through reports, we learned that his mind was filled with disturbing rape fantasies. He had extensive criminal history and had already spent 13 years behind bars for sexual assaults against other women. He was considered by the judges one of the worst of the worst. Through this, all I had learned already, that I couldn't escape him. He was part of our family's story. He was always there, no matter what we did. He was part of our conversations. We were always bound. And so even though we were now entering into a new section, a new process, there was this feeling that there was a new kind of trauma bond happening around us. Lady Justice, this is another one of my husband's sculptures. Notice the DNA being morphed into her arm and into her, because the DNA became terribly important to us because it was the Grant's DNA plus Candace's DNA were found on the rope that had tied her that night. As we were considering the justice process, though, we had all the warning bells were going off in my mind as I remembered that the man who had come to talk to us had not only talked about the aftermath of murder, he had also talked about the process as being something that had just absorbed him. So again, I went into my instincts. Okay, if justice is going to be that hard, it's a good thing, I will put love against it. Wow, I've got two wonderful values, love and justice. Justice without love is punitive. Love without justice is permissive. Those got to go together. But I don't know if you know anything about the polarity, but we can't hold two things of equal value in the same space. I started to cycle between the two. I got stuck in between the two. There's a lot of studies about that too. We cannot hold two things of equal value in our minds. We do have to choose. So which one do I choose? Which one goes first? I chose justice. It's a natural choice. We have to keep our streets safe. We have to keep our children safe. And even on a personal level, if you've hurt me, I'm going to wonder about you and I'm going to put you off until we do this with people. We put them off until they change, until they're remorseful, and then until we can trust them again. And then we invite them back and then we'll love them again. So we do choose justice constantly. And we put people on wait and do the waiting game. And again, I found that when I was doing this, it didn't work for me either, because I was concentrating on justice. And on concentrating on justice, I was concentrating on him again. It was all about his schedule, his blame, his guilt. And I found that I had no control over the justice. In fact, one really bad moment I had, when a lawyer friend of mine said, don't do that to yourself. Only take on what you can control. And don't worry about the rest. Leave it. And so much of this process we had no control over. Well, I couldn't control justice, but I could control love. Over the years, I've spent a lot of time with other crime victims, and I've watched them very carefully to see which ones of them, not only survive, but triumph over what's going on before them. And this one woman had put love first, justice second. Wow, what a concept. But I wondered if it would really help us going through the trial. Putting love first, justice second. What does that look like? It doesn't mean that we negate justice. Justice has to happen. We have to, but love requires justice. The outcome of justice making actually might look very similar if we put love first, because we still have to look at who did it, why they did it. We have to go about containing the uncontrolled and the uncontrollable. And when Grant was sentenced, we did not celebrate. We were grieved with the rest of us that another life, Candace's life, had been lost. Now by sentencing him to all that time in prison, we knew that another life had been lost. And that's always a painful and worthy of grief. But love and justice and all of that is not a one-time decision. It has to go back and forth, and it is a process. I can't say that I am just accomplished now everything, that love is first all the time and justice second. I would never do that. I've already done that once, and I know that something is around the corner. It's only in hindsight that we can see, as we're traveling across the ocean, the wake, we can see what the path has been like. We can actually see the results of our choices. And I must say that as we were going through the trial, we put love first. And it made all the difference because we concentrated on our children. We said, what is it going to take to get you through? And how are we going to sit for 2 months in a courtroom? And so by putting love first, we put creativity into the situation. And both my daughter and my husband are artists. So my daughter was crocheting circles during the whole time, and she had 3 emotions. Cream was for kind of boring, kind of nothing's happening. Red was for pain, and black was for rage. So we'd often look over to see what kind of emotion we should be feeling. It was wonderful to have that kind of creativity, and so was my husband. a sketcher and he was sketching. So they were doing creative things. We were doing it in love. We were exploring. And now when we think back on it, it wasn't a big, long Sahara desert that we were trekking across. It was kind of like one big oasis of love that we had transformed what could be a very brutal and very destroying kind of situation for a family. And so people ask me, keep asking, how did you get through it? Love first, justice second. My daughter, a bit of forgiveness for Grant, and justice in the end did happen and will happen. I truly believe this is what Candace would have wanted for us, to meet each day breaking in front of us, unencumbered, free, and knowing all about the love that she had for us and we still have for her. Thank you so much. Thank you.